All right guys, Clay Hayes here and we are back with another shooting video. Today we're going to be talking about anchor, release, and follow through. So there are two primary purposes of an anchor and they both have to do with consistency. One is consistency in draw length and the other is consistency in the arrow in relation to your eye. So when it comes to barebow shooting, I think there is some confusion around the anchor point. It's very common to hear guys talking about, I have to touch the same spot on my face with each and every shot, and that is what a good anchor point is. And that is a part of what a good anchor point is, but that by itself is not going to be effective. And here's why. If I simply use touching the same spot on my face as my anchor, my draw length can vary considerably by simply not having good structural alignment and good form. Here's what I mean. If I use the middle finger in the corner of my mouth and I don't have good structural alignment and good form, well, I just made a 24-inch draw. That's not going to help you. In order to be effective, that same spot on your face has to be combined with good archery form, good alignment. What that is going to result in is a consistent draw length and a consistent gap between your eye and the nock of the arrow. If you're applying the principles of good archery form and you have good alignment and you're using your back tension to draw the bow, your hand should come naturally into your face. You should not have to use your bicep to pull your hand into your face. And if you do that, if you draw your bow using your back tension, your draw length is going to be very consistent. It's not going to vary that much. Now what you can do is vary the height of your anchor. If you look at some of the Olympic archers, you'll notice that those guys anchor very low down around their chin. Their string oftentimes will come across their lips and then touch the end of their nose. Very rarely will you ever see a barebow archer using a very low anchor like that. Because what it does is it makes a large gap between your eye and the nock of that arrow, which makes it difficult for your mind to compensate for that arrow's trajectory. The reason that Olympic archers can use that is because they're using sights, and so that gap doesn't matter. For barebow shooters, we have to compensate that trajectory, and having a small gap between our eye and the nock of the arrow is really going to come in handy in doing that. One very common anchor for barebow shooters is to take the middle finger and put it right in the corner of your mouth. Now I did that for a lot of years and then I switched it up a little bit and I started taking the middle finger and touching a tooth. That's a much more solid anchor because simply the finger in the corner of your mouth, the skin on your mouth moves around. You can vary your draw length a little bit. You can vary the up and down. But by touching a solid bone structure on your face, that's going to be a much more solid anchor. Since that time, I have moved my anchor up just a little bit, and now I put my index finger on that high cheekbone just underneath my eye. What that does is shrinks that gap between my eye and the nock of the arrow, making aiming for me at the distances that I most often shoot a little bit easier. So no matter what anchor you choose, whether it's down low, in the middle, or up a little bit higher like I anchor, you need to be able to get to that spot naturally without manipulating the string on your face and building up a bunch of tension in your forearm or your wrist. Remember, you need to maintain a relaxed forearm and a relaxed wrist to have a nice smooth release, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Now, one last thing that I want to mention, and I really want to stress this, is consistency in your head position. Because you can have good form, you can have good back tension and all that stuff, you can touch the same spot on your face. But if you don't have a consistent head position, that's going to throw your shot off. So think about it like this. As little as 1/8 inch difference from one shot to another between your eye and the nock of your arrow, at 20 yards, that could mean 3 or 4 inches of difference. So earlier on in this series, I had talked about how I tend to drop my head a little bit towards the string. And the reason that I do that is because it makes that gap a little bit smaller. The gap between my eye and the nock of the arrow makes it a little bit smaller and makes aiming at very close ranges a little bit easier. Now, since I made that, I actually stopped doing that because I realized I was experimenting with it, making that video, and I realized that I was more consistent with a static head position. So just leaving my head static, turning towards the target, and drawing to my face instead of dropping to the string. Who knew? The archery coaches actually knew what they were talking about. What that does is it does make my gaps a little bit bigger, and since I stopped dropping my head, I am shooting a little bit higher. But here's the thing, I'm shooting consistently high, and I will figure that gap out through repetition and through shooting. Consistency is what we're after. If we're grouping a little bit higher, a little bit low, or a little bit left or right, those things can all be fixed. But the group is what's important. All right, let's talk about the release and the follow through. This is something that gives a lot of people trouble. And you'll hear people talking about plucking the string, which basically is any action other than simply relaxing the fingers. A clean release is simply doing nothing. If you have already done the work to set up your shot, if you're paying attention to your form, you've got good form, you've got good back tension, everything is aligned, you're lined up on target. The shot is set up. All you have to do is get that arrow on its way without messing it up. So along those lines, any conscious effort to open the string fingers is going to introduce variability that is going to mess up that shot that you spent so much effort setting up. It's kind of like getting a rifle set up on a bench. The crosshairs are perfectly on the target, and then going up to the trigger and going, and punching that thing. You've messed up everything that you spent so much time setting up. Describing to someone how to do nothing seems like it would be very simple, but it is anything but. The best way that I can tell you is simply to let the string slip from your finger, because you have already set everything up. All you have to do is let the string slip from your finger. And when you do that, if you have good form, if you have good alignment, back tension, and all of that stuff, your wrist is going to come back in a straight line, and your hand is going to end up back here by your shoulder somewhere. So if you set up your smartphone to record yourself in slow motion and to record your release, you should see that bow jumping straight towards the target. You should see your string hand and your wrist coming straight back without any kind of flex or up and down or in or anything like that until you get back around here. And if you see anything other than a straight back movement of your wrist, that's going to indicate that something wasn't quite right in your alignment. Perhaps you were building up tension or manipulating that string onto your face, or your forearm wasn't aligned with the pressure point on your bow hand. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about there, you can go back and check out that video. The link's in the description here. When I have a really good, tight shot, I know immediately before that arrow even hits the target, because the bow will almost jump out of my hand, and then my string hand just naturally ends up right here on my shoulder. That is follow through. Anything that happens after that arrow clears the bow doesn't matter. All right guys, that's gonna do it for this video. In future videos, we're gonna be talking about target panic, buck fever, whatever you wanna call that. And then we're gonna get into some other stuff. But if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that so you don't miss out on that stuff. And if you're new to the series, go back and check out some of the stuff that we have already covered. I wanna thank everyone on Patreon for helping to support these videos. If you're into bow building or you just wanna help support these, go over there and check it out. Patreon.com/Clay Hayes. And with that, appreciate it if you leave a comment, ask any questions that you want to, and I'll try to answer them. And we'll see you guys next time.